All right, hello everybody. We'll be doing lesson 5 today. I kind of talked a little bit about that in the last video that you guys watched, but kind of going through it one more time for you with that. So you should be on lesson 5. Again, all the stuff you need is all here. Tells you in order what you need to do. So first things, complete the Malcolm X reading. Okay, so again, don't do it on this. Don't open these. Don't worry about opening these. Okay, so ignore it. There should be a tab under classwork. Or something that'll pop up on your screen. I'm not sure what you guys kind of see, but you'll see lesson 5 right here. This is the reading that you'll look at, and then here is the Google Doc. So this is the Google Doc you need to open is on this one, not on the other one. It's different. So again, make sure that you guys do it correctly. You open this one up, you'll answer the questions and whatnot, and then you'll submit it, which you guys have done this before. So it shouldn't be a major problem for you. So once you finish that, you go back to the stream, you open lesson 5. There will be a video lecture, obviously, as you're listening to now, and there will be a form that you need to fill out for Google Forms. All right, so those are the 3 things you need to complete for this. All right, so without further ado, go to left off here. Okay. So in the lesson 5, the main topic was learning about MLK and Malcolm X. Did the reading, so you should already have some background knowledge on this. These were really 2 different movements that were going on in the United States, 2 different leaders, 2 different ways of doing things in terms of the civil rights movement. Both were extremely popular amongst different I guess crowds during this time. So we'll kind of go through. We'll go through Martin Luther King Jr. here. So his original name was Michael, but they later changed the name to Martin. Very similar to Malcolm X. His name was Malcolm Little, and then he'll eventually change his name to Malcolm X later on, which we'll get to more in a minute. So in terms of that, they both are very similar in terms of name changes. Also, MLK's father was a minister and leader in the civil rights movement. Very influential in religion, played a big part in his early childhood. Whereas, same thing, Malcolm X, his dad was a part of a group, a black supremacy group. So he was very involved in like civil rights and that kind of thing as well. So they, growing up, they both had these very influential men and people in their lives who were pushing them towards advocating for rights of African Americans. This is where they differed. So MLK, as you guys have read about, he was very influenced by Gandhi. Last year in Global, we talked about Gandhi. Gandhi led the independence movement in India, also known as the father of India. And his big thing was practicing nonviolence. So we can't fight no matter what. So this idea goes back to civil disobedience, that Gandhi and MLK are going to practice to basically refuse to follow government orders through nonviolence. So you're going to be openly challenging and breaking laws that are unfair towards African Americans. Like, for instance, like Rosa Parks, the law where African Americans had to sit in the back of the bus. Again, an unfair law. Openly challenge that. Sacrifice yourself. Be arrested. And challenge it through the courts. Gandhi did the same thing with assault marches to protest British taxes and basically monopoly on salt in India. So you also have the other example of Rosa Parks, but that'll correlate with the Montgomery bus boycott. Again, peacefully, just not riding the bus. So using economic means. So make the bus companies hurt. Don't ride their bus. Don't pay for it. And eventually, as you guys learned in the last lesson 4, that form of protest is going to work because the bus companies need money. And when they're losing riders, that protest is going to work to change the law. So MLK was arrested nearly 30 times over the course of his civil rights career. Be threatened, family will be threatened, house will be bombed. But he's going to keep practicing and preach to his people nonviolence, that the only way for this movement to work is through the nonviolent means. Now, he also believed that integration. He didn't want whites and blacks to be separated. He wanted them to be integrated, that he believed that was the only way to tear down the barriers of racism and stereotypes by getting to know people. Okay, so that's MLK. So here's just kind of showcasing these pictures here. You see this African-American male is being held by a cop as dogs are biting his stomach. So think about this. The reason why MLK wanted this to be a peaceful movement and no violence, don't react, sacrifice yourself, was because he knew that the media and pictures can be slanted in a way, if that makes sense, meaning that you can capture a picture where, say, for instance, if this cop was holding him, but this African American hit the cop, guess what picture would be on the front page news of newspapers? It'd be of the African American male hitting the cop. It wouldn't be of all this stuff before. So if you don't react and don't fight back, the media has no choice but to portray what actually happened, which in this case filled in sympathy, filled in sorry for this African American male. That's the whole point. You can't twist things if this is reality. The same thing. This makes the African American male on the ground look very sympathetic. Like this guy is hovering over him and beating him. Again, making him look like the bad guy and him looking like he's hopeless. So that's the point of the movement, is showcasing the hatred, the anger, and it's the reality of the situation, giving society no choice but to react negatively towards the enforcement. Again, same thing, that these students were protesting the lunch counters in terms of African Americans couldn't sit at the front of the lunch counter. So look at all these young people in the back dumping stuff on them. Now you're probably thinking, well, why are there white students here with them? Why are they having stuff dumped on them? Guys, there were a lot of white sympathizers who joined the civil rights movement because they felt awful about what was going on, didn't feel like what was going on was right. So there were a lot of white Americans that did join the civil rights movement and protested these unfair rules and laws. But again, same thing. You're building sympathy for these individuals. You're bringing attention to the issues and laws in the South, making them look evil, them look good. Same thing goes here. Again, the same image. I'll kind of move on, but I think you kind of get the idea. Same thing. All right. So MLK was assassinated by James Earl Ray on April 4th in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. Same thing. He was going there to bring attention to a strike that was happening and treatment of African Americans, where he will be killed. And this will spark a lot of, outrage across the country. And yeah, so move on from that. All right. So the other civil rights leaders, Malcolm X, also known as Malcolm Little. So, kind of going through this, he will change his name later on to Malcolm X because he believes that Malcolm Little was his slave name, his family slave name. So Malcolm X is like the unknown, the future. His father was a reverend who worked for the rights of African Americans. His father was killed by a white racist. So that's, ultimately being a young kid and having your dad being killed by a white supremacist. That's going to spark, your life and your hatred towards, white people, as you'll see here in a minute. So after this, Malcolm X had a really tough childhood. He was very brilliant, top of the class, but dropped out of school because he was taught by a lot of white teachers and who used a lot of racist terms towards him. So he dropped out of school, turned to a life of crime, had to kind of go from house to house. He ended up being convicted of burglary. And while in prison, that really changed his life. While he was in prison, he learned about the Nation of Islam, did a lot of reading, and learned about Elijah Muhammad, which was the leader of the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam was basically a black supremacist group, black Muslims. And they were teaching a lot of things like the white person is the devil. And they were teaching African Americans that you shouldn't be integrated, you should be separated, that the white man is a devil and you can't trust them, and therefore why would you want to live next to them, that you just keep it separated. So that's where they differed, him and MLK. So they said Malcolm changed his name to Malcolm X because his slave name was Little. He'll dedicate his life to the Nation of Islam. Once he gets out of prison, he'll go to Detroit, where he'll begin practicing the Nation of Islam. And as I said, white man is the devil. He wants separation, no white input, fight violence with violence. So he also very different from MLK is MLK was preaching nonviolence. He was teaching to defend yourself, violence if we have to. And ultimately, one of the things with the Black Panther movement, You see the Black Power symbol, the Black Panthers. You know, they were a group. They were a group that is going to use almost like a defense of their communities. If they see police officers or white supremacists beating down or using their power to beat African American communities, this group, Black Panthers, would fight back. Very militant group. So anyway, now Malcolm X's 1964 trip to Mecca will change his life. He takes a pilgrimage, and he learns more about the Islamic faith. And while he's there, he works with a lot of white individuals, and he noticed that not all white people are racist or all that bad. So they begin to address poverty and unemployment and the economy, and that's where he basically starts to flip his attitude. In the first part of his life, he was very, very resentful of MLK. He downplayed him in the media, criticized him in the media. So when he came home after this trip to Mecca, he began to kind of change his views and become really outspoken against the Nation of Islam. And that was called a mistake or whatever you want to call it. But he became a target of the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad, where he will be assassinated by the Nation of Islam in 1965. And yeah. So after, some of the things in terms of the civil rights movement, in terms of some of the important laws that were passed, as I mentioned before, JFK was very instrumental in drafting the first civil rights laws before his assassination. It's very popular among the African Americans. Now, Thurgood Marshall, right here, you see him right here. He became appointed as the first Supreme Court judge, appointed by JFK. Now, what's interesting about him is that he was the lawyer of Linda Brown in Brown versus Board of Education. That's kind of where he got to start. He was an NAACP lawyer, won the case, historic case, and later become Supreme Court judge, first African American. So the Civil Rights Act, you guys read this in your workbooks. But the Civil Rights Act will ban discrimination in employment and public places. Very instrumental in providing African Americans more economic opportunities. And you have the Voting Rights Act, will also be passed a year later. If you've ever heard the March on Selma, there will be an ed puzzle on this that you'll need to look at. They'll be attached to Google Classroom somewhere. But Voting Rights Act will basically end the poll taxes and literacy tests. They actually passed the 24th Amendment that will end poll tax requirements. So to make sure that every state is upholding the laws of the nation and giving African Americans the right to vote. Then there was the Immigration Act too. So you got to remember, this is the time of the Cold War, 1960s, and civil rights. That you're basically allowing Europeans to come here, but you're limiting the amount of immigrants from Asia and Africa and Latin America. And that was really kind of a contradictory topic. Like, you're in a Cold War, make yourself look better than the Soviet Union, but yet you're having practices that are limiting people who are different colors than you, which was very contradictory. So this is where we begin to allow more immigrants from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The impact of this is still felt today. The Hispanic population is the fastest growing group in the United States. They actually say by 2050 that there'll be more minorities in this country than white people. So kind of read through this, but that's ultimately why this act will open up immigration to a lot more countries, and it will allow more diverse groupings. All right, so that's it for today. The lecture's about up. So anyway, let me know if you have any questions. Something's not working. Good luck.